Today I return to a place I've never been. Hello and welcome to Rotted Review of the Day, and today I am taking a look at the 2019 movie Return to Horror Hotel. When I came across this one and I started watching it, I did not realize that there was a horror hotel in the first place. But what this appears to be is a web series under the name of Horror Hotel that has short films attached to it and apparently occasionally gets compiled into an anthology horror series. So this is being the second of the bunch. So this is an anthology horror, and it's made up of 4 segments: Sleep Tight, Guillotine, No Time for Love, and Houdini's Hand. Now, first of all, this was a miserable watch. I'm just going to state that right up front. It just was absolutely terrible to watch. I actually had to stop after the second segment, give myself a break, and reapproach a few hours later. It was that bad. But that's not... I'm going to talk about it a bit, but I also kind of want to bring up something that I kind of came across when I was looking into this movie a little further. It is available right now on Amazon Prime, and looking at IMDb, there seems to be a fairly high rating for it in terms of it's not 1 star across the board, which is, to my mind, after having watched it, somewhat suspect. And I know that rating padding is not, an uncommon practice, but I saw some pretty flagrant examples of it. And I just wanted to kind of point that out. This movie has maybe about 67 some odd reviews on IMDb currently, only I think 7 of which are actually commented, articulated, descriptive reviews, as opposed to just clicking 1 to 10 stars. And of those 7, there were several that were glowing reviews, anywhere from 7 to 9 stars. And I noticed that each and every one of those reviews, if you click on their profiles, then you will see that the other movies that they reviewed are also fairly unknown. Maybe 22 actual, even just non-commented reviews for a particular movie, like Beyond the Spectrum, Muson's UFO Files. And the weird thing is, all 5 or 6 of those people that commented with their reviews on Return to Horror Hotel also commented with glowing reviews on several of the movies that were made by or distributed by Indie Rights, of which Return to Horror Hotel is also distributed by. So it appears that Indie Rights has people working for them, or they hired it out. But I just kind of felt the need to point it out. One of the reasons that I do these reviews, and I do them perfectly honestly, and one of the reasons that I don't accept any money or ad revenue from film distributors, and I know that this is a small channel, and it's not like cards on the table. I've never had the opportunity. Nobody's ever knocked on my door, but it is kind of a silent rule that I've made for myself really early on, is that no review of mine will be bought. And one of the reasons for that is because I believe that if somebody is seeking out opinions of a film before they want to watch it, then they deserve to have the most honest feedback possible. And that's ultimately why I made this channel. So buyer beware on that. If you look this up on IMDb, it's not a hugely high rating, because they are kind of battling against the people that have already actually seen it, but don't have the time or wherewithal to actually bother commenting on it. So the star rating kind of winds up, I don't know what it's at right now. I think it's something like 5.6, but that's still 5.5 higher than it should be. So to get into the movie itself, so all 4 segments seem to be kind of centered around the setting of taking place within a cheesy hotel or motel. And I'm going to go ahead and throw up all the scores here. Each category is worth up to 25 points for a total possible score of 100 points. Sleep Tight, well, Okay, I'll go through a brief synopsis of all these. Sleep Tight follows a couple that breeds bed bugs so that they can grind them up and get people high, of which some escape and bite into a bodybuilder who has filled himself with all sorts of steroids and creatine and all sorts of, sick gains, bro. And as a result, the bed bugs have gotten huge and start attacking folks. Guillotine has to do with a relic found and is being traded for a car. This ancient relic that is Marie Antoinette's guillotine, which is made into a necklace that Marilyn Monroe wore and so many other successful, beautiful models wore. And apparently you wear it, it makes you beautiful. So two women trade it for their car and things start happening to them. No Time for Love was, I think, one of the most promising of the segments, but ultimately kind of fell flat and fell nowhere. Man is isolated in his hotel room and never really comes out. He orders books remotely, has them leave them by the door, pays well, and never interacts with anybody. Reclusive hermit. So a girl dropping one of the books off is kind of put to the challenge of finding out what he looks like, and in doing so kind of gets brought into his world. And Houdini's Hand, which it's basically just a couple of ne'er-do-well heist men stole something off of another heist man, and things go wrong. Anyway, it's really not worth exploring too much further into them. They are just absolutely terrible. But thinking about it, I kind of wound up in a bit of a conflict with myself, and here's why. All of these have the exact same feel to them, possibly with the exception of No Time for Love. But the problem with No Time for Love, just to kind of deviate from just a little bit here and talk about that one, the problem with that one is it needed more to flesh out. We're talking about two characters that have just interacted with each other, and we're supposed to buy the fact that that love is even on the table for them. I mean, talking about love at first sight and so on and so forth, it still needs dialogue to flesh out. And it didn't get sold by it. The dialogue was terrible and the acting didn't sell it in the slightest. So nothing about it really worked as far as the two characters interacting with one another. So it needed more time to flesh out. Like almost a feature-length motion picture would be kind of required to make the concept work. But at the same time, two people in an isolated room is not interesting enough to make for a full-length motion picture. So the whole concept is kind of caught in its own catch-22 there. But regardless, all of the segments had roughly the same feel, and it's one that I don't really particularly care for, and this is where kind of it caused some conflict in my brain. All of these had kind of a spastic, manic sense of wry humor about them that I don't necessarily go for in my horror films. It was hugely prevalent in the 80s. Characters that were just over the top and extreme, close to the lens, gross out, and one note stereotypical. You'll have kind of the odd nerd, and it will be, instead of a nuanced kind of character and performance, it'll just be completely, tape on the glasses, sticking his finger up his nose as close to the camera as possible and showing the long strand of boogers come out. It's the kind of lowbrow, gross out humor that some people enjoy, and, tip of my hat to them. I just don't really go for it. But thinking about it, I kind of, was kind of thinking about, well, why not? This is not unprecedented for me to like this kind of thing. Where does it work and where doesn't it? And I think most notably was the Stephen King segment of the first Creepshow movie, The Lonesome Death of Jordy Verrill, where he encounters the meteor, and his performance was very comedic and over the top, and everything about it, was comedic and over the top, except for the actual circumstances were pretty horrific. And he was apparently told by the director, George Romero, to play it like Wile E. Coyote falling over the cliff. And you can see that element of over-the-top, slapsticky kind of performance in every single line of dialogue and every movement he makes. It's just dripping with it. And even in his imagination, when he thinks about taking the meteor to the meteor center in the university and so forth, that whole dream sequence segment there was over the top and comedic, and I enjoyed it. That's one of my favorite moments in anthology horror. And I don't know, maybe it's me looking at it through the rose-colored glasses of nostalgia. That's entirely possible, and I give that all the credence in the world. But I think what it ultimately comes down to is Return to Horror Hotel, start to finish, had not a single good acting performance in it. And you can tell that by the acting score I gave it here. It was just miserable throughout the entire thing. Half of the characters seemed to be forgetting their lines constantly and tripping over, well, he just said that, so that's my cue. What's that? Okay, employ this mnemonic device. Okay, here we go. Okay, I got the line, and blah. And just there was no such thing as any natural conversation in this film. And it really showed. You can tell that they tried to tighten it up and replace a lot of stammering and so forth with quick cut edits, but it just didn't work, and it was terrible performances throughout. So is it a situation where I don't like that kind of lowbrow, gross out, slapsticky comedy in my horror films, or is it just that it was not sold well? And honestly, I'm kind of leaning more towards the latter. I think, honestly, when you have that kind of lowbrow humor element, and let's take horror out of the mix, and let's just go straight comedy, comedic films, I think when you go that lowbrow route, it is very easy to step into a world of bad performances, and it just doesn't work. Some people will still find the humor in it and, will appreciate it for what it is there. And like I said, opinions differ. People differ. That's fine. I got no issue with that. If you like this kind of thing, we're not going to see eye to eye, but I don't think any less of you. But it's really just not my thing. And I think in order to have that kind of comedic element, it needs to be sold well. It needs to have good performances. It needs to walk that line carefully. And this movie just did not. It ran across the line haphazardly with poor performances, poor budgets, poor effects, poor technicals, poor camera work, and then padded the reviews by the distributor. And ultimately, I would absolutely not in a million years recommend Return to Horror Hotel to anybody in the slightest, even if you like comedy in your horror. This was just not done well. So that should about do it. That's my review of 2019's Return to Horror Hotel. I really thank you for joining me here today. I look forward to seeing you tomorrow. If you like these videos, please click subscribe. If you want to support me further, my Patreon link is below. Remember, next time you want to watch a horror movie, first make sure that it's good and rotted.